Hey guys, I'm Steven Farnsworth.
And I'm Grant Babbitt.
And you're listening to It's a Dad Thing podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of It's a Dad Thing podcast. Steven, hello sir, and welcome to, what is this, March Madness? This is officially March Madness,
Yeah, man, this
right?
is the month.
It's on.
Yes, we are in the madness of March.
How you doing, my friend?
Love this time. I'm doing great, man. March is awesome. The pandemic seems to be headed in the right direction, like on its way out. I don't know how soon. Could be a very long time from now, but at least it looks like we might be getting back to some normalcy here in LA. Like we might get some indoor dining, who knows?
Maybe.
Fingers crossed.
I would love to be as optimistic as you are, but the fact that Italy just re-shut down again because of the variants, I'm not super stoked about it. So we'll see. Yeah. I think, look, you want to know my opinion. I've said it probably many times before, but I think complacency is the one thing that is going to be the thing that's going to make this go on and on and on. I really would love nothing more than for it to just be over. But, we all got to do it. We all got to do the things. We got to get vaccinated, got to wear a mask, all that kind of stuff. So, right. So let's see. Hopefully we can do that stuff done. We can get that stuff done. Then, I would like to actually, oddly enough, I would like to spend some actual FaceTime with you in real life. I know.
Who knows?
It's hard for you to believe that, let alone the listeners at this point. But really, I would like to actually see you in real life. But yes, and having the kids be able to play with their friends and do all that, go back to school and be a part of it. Yes, that would be awesome. But I will say, I am much happier this year for March. That March Madness is actually talking about basketball instead of the madness of coronavirus and everything that had been coming down and just hitting our country as a whole, really. But also, we've got the tournament this year. We've got the tournament. It's
actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, let me just throw this out there, okay? Last year, who was the AP number one overall at the end, right? Who was the number one? Who's going to be number one on the AP poll end of the year? Anybody? Any guesses?
I don't remember, but I'm guessing based on the shirt that you brought in and how you have a little bit of a smirk, it's Kansas.
Do I not always have a little bit of a smirk? Is that not just how I look?
When you talk Kansas, okay. when you bring something up and the answer is something to do with Kansas, you have a little smirk.
I can't hide it. I love my Jayhawks. Yes, the Jayhawks were AP number one. We had a really good chance of, doing well in the tournament. And yes, coronavirus hit and it was an awful thing. And there's so much stuff that went with it. But on a sports note, purely just sports, it was so hard to not only have the tournament, but know that the Jayhawks were in a really good position.
Right.
So it was tough.
Yeah. And all those student athletes, to be honest, like all those seniors that didn't get to play in the tournament, like that's just heartbreaking.
Well, and it's very weird to hear 6th year senior now, because now everybody gets the extra year of eligibility.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, I was listening to senior night and then they were like, Mitch Lightfoot, he sounds like he's coming back for his 6th year. And I'm like, that just sounds so weird to me, but hey, I get it. Right. When I was in college, I didn't really want to leave either. I totally understand. I just wanted to stay there as long as I could and not have to go to the real world. But speaking of real world, here we are, and we've got a guest today. Steven, why don't you introduce our guest?
I'm super stoked because this is called It's a Dad Thing. And for the first time, we have one of our dads on, and this is my dad. I call him dad. Other people call him coach. Other people call him pastor. Very few people call him Brad. But this is my dad, the other guy that's on the line right now.
Hey, Brad, welcome.
So welcome. Dad. Thank you so much,
guys.
So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. So dad to the 4th power. So it's, 3 boys and a little girl. She's not little anymore. Empty nesting, sort of. We can talk about that if you want. Grandma lives with us now. So that's, we had 6 months of empty nesting. It was like, we've got this. 4 kids gone after 3 decades. It's just you and I, baby. No, grandma moved in. But my so background for me is, I've been on all kinds of things, but radio was a big part of my life. That's the dad that you knew, Steven, was the radio dad.
Yep.
And then the other kids on the backside knew pastor dad. And now after all that, I'm back and I'm radio pastor dad. So I'm still doing radio and I'm pastoring. So I'm all over the board now.
That's true. I should add in one other thing that you've been called. And that was whenever I was a kid, it was Banana or Banana Brad. That was the other.
Hold on. Now, is this anything like the Banana Boat boys? Because I know we're talking NBA when we talk Banana Boat, but is this there could be, you go so many different ways with this. What? Please explain. What is the banana story, Brad? What is this?
Man, there's things you do when you're young, and then you're stuck with it. And you live with regret. So that's what I want to say first and foremost to every dad is be careful the decisions you make early on, because that tag will stay with you.
Yeah.
So when we moved to Tulsa and I took my radio job, they said, "Hey, we want you to use a crazy nickname." And I was like, "I don't have one." And I just go by my name. They're like, no, you got to be known by something. And the short end of that story is for a week, I couldn't figure out anything. I never had a nickname growing up. And so I was sitting down, literally eating breakfast the morning I was getting ready to go on the radio. And I was eating a banana. That's the story. And I went and they said, "Hey, what's your name?" And I was like, "Banana." And they were like, "Great, here we go. Banana Mel in the morning on Z104.5. And it was born. It actually worked. Honestly, it worked.
It worked, yeah.
It got us, a lot of recognition. But it helps me. How it helps me is, see, Grant, I can tell just by one, how old you are, because it's been forever since I was that. But when nobody here in town can fool me in saying, "Oh man, listen to you all the time," because I'll say the name Banana and they either are like, "Yes," they're super excited, or they're like, "What?" And so if they give me that, "What?"
Well, what's great about the name of Banana is that I'm sure, and I don't know if this will help your story at all, but it's a very appealing name.
Wow. See that? That's why, Grant, you have to be so careful with what you do in life. Because if I've heard,
I guess you could say you don't really want to slip up in life, like on a banana peel. All right. I could. So I weirdly have a lot of banana jokes. No, that I totally understand that. By the way, I love that story. I also have a name. I don't get called that anymore, but in high school, my nickname, very much not as innocent as yours. Mine was Naked Boy, which, maybe not the best thing to follow you through life, but there was, when I was in high school, there was a Blink 182 was a band, and they had a music video for What's My Age Again?
Yeah.
And, they ran around naked, and I was in video production in high school. And I thought, you know what? I was a sophomore in advanced, and I thought I'm in advanced video production, but I'm only, I'm a sophomore with all these seniors who felt so much older and bigger and wiser than I did at the time. Now looking back, I'm like, no, nobody knows anything. But at the time, I really wanted to impress the seniors. So what I did is I was like, I'm going to remake that video. I'm going to remake What's My Age Again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run around in, not totally naked, but in my underwear, right? Because clearly I got to turn it in still for a project for points. But our school at the time happened to be testing out the security cameras for the first time. This is pre-2001. So this is not when there's always, now there's security cameras everywhere. It's always been since then, but pre-2001, they were installing security cameras, and I thought, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna run through the hallway in my underwear during school, and someone's gonna film it. This is gonna be hilarious. And that I did it. I ran back in the room, put my clothes back on real fast, and all the seniors thought I was like the coolest little sophomore because I did what I said I was gonna do, and then the name Naked Boy stuck. And then after that, it was like, okay, well, I know this kid. He'll streak. He'll naked jump on trampolines. He'll do, and it just, I was like, I gotta buy into it now. I gotta buy into it.
Yeah. You're committed.
Yeah. So, but here's the irony. When I got out I was in college or something, I started a YouTube channel, and it was called Naked Boy Productions. I have so many views on so many videos, and it's not because of the quality of my videos. All right. That's searchability right there in a very, not okay way. But yes, you're exactly right. Be careful what you do at a younger age because it follows you. Banana, totally innocent. I like that.
Yep, it does.
This not smart on my part. So, but I'm glad. I like it. Steven, do you have a ridiculous nickname?
The only nickname that I had was Sparky. And that was I don't even remember when that was. I feel like junior high school. And I don't even remember how. You might actually, Dad, know where. I know it came from Brian Leonard. I believe is who it came from. And then it was because something to do with Spark in a basketball game, but you might have more insight on that.
So, his nickname was Sparky, but it really wasn't much of a nickname at first because I coached Steven at the end of every year. I'd give the kids a card, a basketball card, like this is who you play like. And I gave him a Sparky Anderson baseball card. The only time I ever gave a kid a baseball card. And I told him I said, hey, it's because he was the spark. And he really was. When he played, when he would get going, the team would get going. And so I was telling my buddy, Brian Leonard, about it. And I was telling him, it's like, so I called him and he's like, Sparky. And the name just kind of began. And so you had that probably junior high school. And then when you moved away, it kind of, I think, faded away. But that's been,
you could say it fizzled out.
Oh, jeez.
I'm telling you.
We're gonna have to cut your mic off.
Please, no. We can't have dad jokes on a Dad Thing podcast. Man. Like, what are we doing here? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Man, I can't wait till your jokes age over decades, man. They're really.
You know what? I have always told these jokes. But I became a dad so it could be acceptable, right? That was
right.
This is all. That was like, I want to be a dad. People are like, why? You love kids. I'm like, no. I'm just really, I really love dad jokes. The dad, like being a dad thing is different. And that's just for the jokes. That doesn't work out for that. It's just anyway.
Hey, you know what the worst part though is, Grant, is when you tell a joke and you're trying to be funny, and somebody's like, "That's such a sorry dad joke," and you're like, oh man, I wasn't even trying to make a dad joke. Like I was legitimately trying to be funny.
Fair, a lot of my material, as you could probably guess, doesn't work very well. So I have to play off a lot of my dad jokes as like, oh, I wasn't trying to be funny. Oh, I wasn't.
Right. There you go.
Okay.
Well, one of the exciting things is that we're talking about March Madness and how we're right in the middle of it. We're actually on Selection Sunday, which is one of the more exciting times during this March period, because this is when we officially know the teams that are going to be put in the bracket.
Yeah, or the teams that are not in the bracket. Just some didn't make it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I don't know what you mean by that, but thanks.
If you're watching video, then you would understand. There you might be able to figure that out on one of these shirts that are being worn, and clearly somebody didn't get the memo of the blue shirts. So, but one of the awesome things, and why I wanted to specifically bring my dad on for this portion, is because in my childhood, the biggest sporting time of the whole year was March. Every March, it was the first weekend was like nothing but basketball. And it's definitely been a topic of conversation that we've had over the years, even being outside the home. And so I told you, Grant, I think I told you this maybe a few months ago, that I was like, no, I don't think you understand that this was like such a big deal in my household that like my dad would even like take off work for the first round and he would watch it. And that was like, he would take actual PTO for those times and actually like schedule time off work to make sure that happened. Right. And I've heard that that's even happening now when there's no kids in the house, which is awesome. So I wanted to kind of have you talk a little bit about, basketball and being a dad and specifically this time period, how like having us running around and, you know, being kids and whatnot, but I was still very much integrated in knowing what was happening in those first rounds, understanding what the bracket meant, you know, like when you just say the bracket out of context, I'd be like, I know exactly what that is and I know what that entails. So yeah, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I live for March Madness. I think every dad's got to have their thing. And for, you know, as dads, it just feels like Grant, I don't even know where you are right now, but you're not in a studio. That's pretty obvious. So, you know, we're kind of relegated to, we don't own anything in the home. Okay. And you're doing what your family does. And I love that, but every dad kind of needs their thing in basketball. I've just always loved basketball, and college basketball is just, that's my thing. And so I have watched the tournament. I tried to do the math on it. I want to say at least, I think about 25 years I've been doing this. And I take time off. I take vacation days. I know when the tournament is. I plan it out way ahead of time. In fact, Mom and I are going on vacation this week. And so I looked at her and she goes, "We'll be back in time for the tournament." Because I will, I mean, you know, as a dad, I would just say, because when you got 4 kids, they're pulling on you and they want different things. And I'm there. I want to give and do whatever I can for my kids. But I'm like, hey, this is the only thing I ask for. Just give me, and what I ask for is give me the first 2 days of the tournament, 11 a.m. And this is Tulsa time, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. That's all I ask for on a Thursday and on a Friday. Don't ask me a question. Don't bother me. I just go see your mom. Mom makes me cinnamon rolls for March Madness. So when the tournament begins, which is weird, it's not on a Thursday this year. It starts on a Friday because of COVID. So it's really weird. But she'll make me cinnamon rolls. In fact, one year, it's a true story. This is absolutely true. She made like a dozen cinnamon rolls. And I got up at about 10 o'clock that night and it was winding down. And I thought, I think I could eat one more cinnamon roll. And I looked down, and I am not kidding. I looked down, there were six cinnamon rolls gone. And I looked around and no one else in the house had one. And I had eaten 6 cinnamon rolls in one setting. So yeah, I live for it. I love it. I live for the bracket. It's just,
you know, it made sense to me because it was 12 hours, 12 cinnamon rolls. I thought for sure you're just going to power through one an hour.
I know.
Right? It's just like a little power boost. Like, oh, it's halftime. Time for a cinnamon roll. Boom. You know, that's just how I, when you talk in cinnamon rolls, that's how my brain works.
There you go, right there. See, that's it right there. So the thing that I'll tell you that's interesting is how brackets are done now. Like before we went on, we were sending each other electronic brackets, and back in the day, you had to print out the bracket. I don't know if anybody remembers doing that, but you guys do. And I tell you, the biggest change from being a dad with kids at home, and Steve can tell you, is every member of the family had to fill out a bracket. That's just how it worked. Everybody, and your mom was the worst, and your sister was the worst at filling out brackets. They did not want to fill out the bracket. But they would finally get it filled out the last moment. But I could control that because I was the dad. I mean, we're in the home. Everybody is filling out this stinking bracket. But now that everybody's gone and everybody's grown up, I can't force anyone to fill out a bracket. I can't make anybody do it. And I'm like, come on, guys, it's supposed to be our family thing. Come on, I only asked for one thing. Fill out the bracket. So we'll see how it goes this year if I can get.
That's funny. I remember cutting out like the section of the newspaper that had the empty bracket and filling out like the newspaper version of the bracket, and that was how I could do it. Wow. But yeah, I mean, like I was going to ask you about that because I remember distinctly, even just watching the tournament. Really, I mean, those first 2 days. I know you're taking off work, but at one point in my household when we were a kid, we had. I'm sure there's other people out there that have had that, but we have the one big TV in the living room, and then we have the little TV in the living room. You know, for us, it was like, oh, we want to be able to watch this, but then there's this other thing is on too, right? So, which sounds ridiculous, but you know, when you're having the 2 tube TVs out there, it was
the original picture-in-picture.
Oh man, it was heaven. It was so good. But I mean, I remember distinctly like that being the case, and then it was like, okay, now the tournament's going to be on like 4 different channels. And it was like, okay, now I got to jump from like CBS to True TV to like whatever. And then where's it TBS? Okay, it's here. And I have to find all the games, and which is not difficult in retrospect, but now knowing like what it is now, I remember right before we moved to LA, sitting and trying to watch those like first couple of days in the tournament. And I'm not, I didn't take off work, but I definitely didn't get anything done, which I think is, you're there, you're like, I'm going through the motions, but I'm not working. Yeah. I'm not doing, like, I may have been in class, but I'm not, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about what's going on in my bracket, whatever. And I remember before we moved to LA, watching all the different channels, and that was how we watched it. And luckily I had cable, or else I was going to miss those games. Cause I knew there were people that didn't have cable, especially when you're a college kid and you don't have any money. Right. And you're like, well, I guess I have to go somewhere to watch those games. But you don't have money to spend to have like a food and drink in front of you all day watching games either. So what are you going to do? So anyway, I mean, for us, I remember that. And then shifting to this, like, oh, now you can watch them online, and that you can just click. And I remember the very first like spring I spent in LA, I sat in front of my computer and like for 2 days and was just like, this is awesome. I could just like click on what game I want on the internet and just watch it. And my bracket's right here and it's all connected. And now it's on my phone. I can just, so it's crazy how accessible it is now. I mean, honestly, I kept thinking, I don't have CBS on my phone. Like there's no way I'm going to have to turn on a TV so I can watch a selection show. And then I remembered, no, March Madness. I got the app, and that got everything. So it's like, it's the amount of access, it's so different from what it was. And I'm sure even when you started watching, which earlier from when I was doing it, I mean, it's changed so much over the time.
Yeah. Well, it used to be, you could only watch it like on CBS. That was it. That was the only network that carried it. And then they did the multiple thing. And I don't know, Stephen, if you remember this, but I would unhook the other TVs in the house and I would bring them down into the living room, and I would hook them up so that we could watch on the other networks. And so I'd have 2 or 3 games going at one time. I think I mainly did it with one other TV, and because our other TV had picture in picture. Right. So I could have all the games playing out right in front of me. So no one could even watch TV because there was no phones. There was no internet. Exactly. Like, no one could. For 2 days, everybody's like, well, I guess we're not watching anything. But
and you were talking about...
Yeah, and do you remember the boss button? Does anybody remember the boss button? When you're online watching, there was something called a boss button. And so when you're on the main app, and they'll probably still have it, but basically it's for when you're working in the office. And now most people at this point aren't during the pandemic. But the idea was like because I mean, there's some article that came out in the last few years that there was like $1 billion lost or something over those 2 days because of the lack of work that's happening. But there was a boss button. So as soon as your boss would walk by your monitor, you could click it and it would bring a generic spreadsheet up on the screen. Right. And it would.
The irony is, though,
it's like a quick deterrent.
The irony is, though, you walk by your boss's office and you see the same screen and you're like, hold on, can you use the boss button? You're like, is that okay? Yeah.
Right. You're the boss. Yeah. What's going on?
If we're down, like, why don't we just all watch it? Let's just mark this off as a day. We're here. Yeah. So you were talking about brackets, and for us, I remember, early on, my wife and I, before we had kids, this difference of before kids and after kids, like, it was so fun. We'd fill out our brackets, we'd challenge each other, we'd put like some kind of bet on the line, right? And then we had our first child, he was a baby, and I think at one point we were like, we'll put 2 names, and we had him like as a baby pick out we wrote up a piece of paper and then we put him 2 down. I would be like, okay, I'm gonna pick VCU over Duke, and you're like, really? Are you sure you want to do that? And it's like, he's a baby, he's just picking stuff. But at one point, he's doing better than I am in the bracket. So anyway, that stuff is always fun, especially when you have little kids. You can find different ways to have them do it. I would tell my kids also another year when they got a little bit older, but again, still little, they would say like, okay, what are the 2 teams? And I'm like, well, it's a duck, right? It's a duck and it's a devil. And they're like, I think a devil would beat a duck. And you're like, okay, you got it. That's all right. So there's like all these fun ways you can definitely incorporate it and be creative when they're little. Yeah. I will say the last year or 2 is just, we went from, last year we didn't do it. So that I was like, I feel like we didn't do it recently. Yeah, because we didn't have a tournament last year. But this year, we may or may not do it. But for instance, like I've been working on a feature. Like I've been working on a feature film, and I don't know if I've mentioned this very much on the show before, but when, unlike where I'm working, like if I can work a 9-to-5 job, I'm still busy, right? But if I'm working a feature, that sucks the life out of me. And that, like, I don't mean that as like, that's an awful thing, but I mean like, it encompasses your world. So, I'm leaving before the kids wake up. I'm coming home after they're asleep, and there's barely enough time for myself. And I'm usually falling asleep during dinner. So it's like, it's not like to even think about trying to figure out what's been going on with the tournaments this week and, catching up with basketball coming up to it, other than catching headlines here or there or trying to catch clips on ESPN. Like, it's been hard for me to follow it. So this year I feel so out of it. I know, my team has been going through some issues. If any of you are listening, you don't know, my team is the Kansas Jayhawks. What we talked about, you talked about Kansas or college basketball is your thing, Brad.
Yeah.
Growing up in Kansas, we didn't have a professional basketball team. So our professional basketball team were the Jayhawks that were all going to the NBA. Like it was huge. It was awesome.
Right.
And so why do you need the NBA at that point? For me as a kid. So,
hey, I'll tell you, Grant. So Grant, real quick, what I wanted to tell you is like, it's weird because I'm a Kentucky fan. And so I shouldn't be a Kansas fan. It doesn't fit, but I am a Kansas fan. And one of my favorite moments was with my youngest son, Jeremiah. I think it was 2 years ago. We went to Allen Fieldhouse when there wasn't the basketball season, and snuck down on the court and went out and walked out on the court and just walked around on that court. It was just to be in that place. It's an amazing place for college basketball.
It really is. And I don't know if you get a chance to go back there now, they've actually rebuilt some of the stuff in the building. And so the official rules of basketball are there in the hall. And they have like a literal hall all dedicated to it. So if you get a chance and you are a basketball fan, I would definitely highly recommend it. Not only are you on hallowed ground.
Yeah, I've seen it? That.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. It's the Hall of Fame thing there is incredible. Wilt Chamberlain stuff there. It's
amazing.
Really cool.
And it's okay that you like Kentucky and Kansas won, because I'm Kansas, and great, more the merrier. Not hating on our team. I love it. But the other thing too is obviously, and I mentioned this last week, but the KU basketball is, central to basketball, college basketball, right? We have James Naismith, who, by the way, Naismith, who was the creator of the game, was the only losing coach in Kansas history. He's the only one to not have a winning record overall. Yeah, fun facts from me. He's the only coach to not have a winning record. But Fog Allen, who is what Allen Fieldhouse is named after, was our most winningest coach and everything. And not only did he coach basketball, he also went over and coached football. I mean, he just did stuff that you just don't do nowadays. And he had done it for so long. So he coached. I think it's Adolf Rupp, who is now Rupp Arena in Kentucky, is named after a KU basketball player. So there's that. And then of course, UNC, they have Dean Smith, and Dean Smith was a player who was also played under Fog Allen, who is now in North Carolina. And then, you've got the connection of Roy Williams out there. So you've got all this like blue blood connection. And again, I know if you just listened to the last episode or last week, I know I touched on it, but I'm just going to keep saying it. Like the history is so cool. Like, it's so cool to know that there are these blue buds, and yes, we are connected, even though we may say like, look, I don't like Kentucky, but I don't like Kentucky because of John Calipari. It doesn't really have anything to do with Kentucky. I just know, look, we beat him when we played Memphis, and that was such an emotional roller coaster for me to experience that game. And then it was just like free throws. That's what kept us in the game. Yeah. I mean, it was, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but that's the thing. It's like, I love KU basketball. That was always my thing. And the bracket is such a fun time that brings not only this like really interesting history, but it brings friends together. It brings families together. Like you're talking about building the bracket. And there is so much camaraderie that comes out of this that it was such a disappointment last year we didn't have it. And so what was that like? I mean, for somebody who takes time off of work, I mean, I know the whole world stopped, but what was that like last year to take this thing that you love so much and it's just gone away? I mean, how did you feel? What did you experience? What was it like?
Yeah, that was bizarre because I was almost depressed. And I was talking to my wife about that, and I said, "I'm just really down." And she goes, "It's okay. It's something you love." And
Mhm.
I was like, "Please have the tournament, please,"
Mhm.
because they were so close to having the tournament. It was right when it was all happening. And I think it's just it's just something when it's something you love and you enjoy
Mhm.
and it's taken from you. Like, and I think anybody could point to anything
Mhm.
in the pandemic and say, this is something I love to do. And then it was taken from me. And just the joy of the game. I'll tell you, the one thing that I have discovered is, Grant, even this year, I haven't followed college basketball like I normally do. And I haven't really followed sports
Mhm.
like I normally do. And it seems like every guy I talk to is feeling the same way. They're not just, I'm
Yeah.
not keyed in. Like, I'm a Laker fan. They won the NBA championship. And I was sitting there watching the game. They won the game. I was sitting in my chair, and Laura walks into the room and she goes, "Oh, what's going on?" And I go, "Oh, they just won the championship." And she goes, "Why aren't you screaming and yelling and going?" I go,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with fans and the fans being such a part of the
Mhm.
sport, and just and everything's just so messed up. And honestly, I love the tournament, and I'm excited about it this year, but I'm not into it like I
Mhm.
normally
Mhm.
am. And I'd be open to how you guys are processing it. I know a lot of it has to do with the pandemic, but I'm trying to figure out why is it I am not as geared up as I normally am about it.
Steven, you got you.
Well, I think it's
Go
that
ahead.
camaraderie thing, right? Like it's the little bit of yes, the fans in the stands, which I think I think the NBA did a good job of being able to like put some fans up on the side. So at least when the players were coming down the court, you could see some hands raised, and it was like the best of what they could do at the time. But there's just nothing like because I think this also translates for the players. I think what will be really interesting about this tournament and what I hope will happen is it'll be a lot like the NBA one, where I think it'll make everything a lot more even. Because what happens a lot in these, and
Mm,
why I think a lot, one of the things about the blue bloods not doing so well, or the typical one and done schools not doing so well this year, there's a lot that goes into that from, practice time and all that stuff. But I think there also comes a lot of times from being there in Rump Arena or an Allen Fieldhouse and being, the opposing team and having that pressure,
yeah.
being
Oh
at
yeah.
these different
Yeah.
stadiums and different arenas and having that pressure. When you remove all the fans, it's just another gymnasium. It's just another
Right.
place, and you don't have that pressure of like, now it's free throw time and you have all these people yelling and there's people doing the clapboards or whatever. You don't have that effect. And so for the NBA, it actually turned out, I feel like, some of the better NBA games that I've seen in a very long time, where it's just like, I mean, there's so many like overtime winners, and like, the Denver Nuggets went on a
Hmm.
run and like they really showcased. And I think a team like that did much better because, they didn't have, some of these traditional powerhouses that kind of overwhelm you with their fans, that kind of stuff happening. But I think that also lends to the fans as well, being like, it's disjointed. It feels kind of like I'm watching a video game, because there's not the people in the
Mm.
stands, and there's not like, even there's some games yesterday that where like Dick Vitale's like calling the game from his like spare bedroom, and it's just
Mhm.
like, as much as I like
Yeah.
hearing Dick Vitale on the call,
Yeah.
there's something when he turns and he's not there at the score table that you're just like,
Yeah.
oh man,
Yeah.
there's just something missing, and that's part of the,
Hmm.
the tournament that I think will, be a little bit of a disappointment, but I hope that the games will, be, good enough that it will still provide that spark and that kind of thing that the players do. One of the things that I was going to mention with the being a dad and basketball in our household was so important. One of the cool stories from, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the current coach, Bill Self of Jayhawks, was the coach at Tulsa University. And so whenever I
Hmm.
was playing, I remember being in a shooting slump, and me being a an average size white guy. That was kind of all I had. And so like that being in like a, short supply for the moment, I didn't know what to do. And I remember my dad helping me out by actually hooking me up and actually having a conversation with Bill Self. And I remember I mentioned this on the last podcast with David, but now that we have my dad on, I'd love to kind of hear from you, Dad, like what kind of went into that from the dad perspective, because I kind of shared very briefly from the son perspective, but kind of how did that evolve, and what, you being a coach already, you coached me all growing up, and now you weren't my coach, but you were still very instrumental in like helping me through that process.
Yeah. So one of the big things for me, every dad's got kind of their niche of how they parent. And I think I parented like a coach. I mean, with every one of my kids, all I wanted was for them to achieve and be the best they could possibly be and love what they do. In fact, I said it over and over to the kids over and over and over and over and over again. Figure out what you love to do and find a way to make money at it. I mean, I just said that over and over and over again. And what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And you love basketball. And you got in this shooting slump. And I mean, some people may not understand this, but you were just so discouraged. And I know you're my son, but you could shoot lights out. I mean, the kid, you just could drop it. I mean, it was amazing. You were a great shooter, but you weren't hitting the broadside of a barn. And it was so discouraging because that was your game.
Right.
Like that is what made you a great player. And I just it really bugged me seeing you be so discouraged, not just about basketball, but just in life, seeing you down. And I wanted you I want to see how I could help you. So I happened to be in radio at the time, and Bill Self was the coach at TU. And so I emailed him, and I didn't know him personally, but I knew him a little bit through media. That's the only way I knew him. No personal relationship. And I just explained to him, hey, my son plays for, Union, a local high school, and he's in a shooting slump right now. And I'm really not concerned about trying to get him, fix his shot. I said, but he's really, really discouraged. Do you have anything as a coach that you would tell me that I could help him with to get him out of this slump, just to help him to be encouraged? I want to get him out of this mindset and get his head positive again. And I just, I didn't know if I'd ever hear from him. Next email I get back, it's from Bill Self, and he says, yeah, bring him by practice. I'm like, what? He said, bring him by practice. Okay. So we went to a practice, and we sat in at one of the University of Tulsa's practices. Practice was over. Bill Self came over, and he sat down, and I thought he was going to give us 2 minutes. I mean, he's a busy guy. That was going to be like, hey, oh, nice to meet you, Steven. Hang in there. It's going to be okay. You can do this, buddy. I thought he was just going to, and I thought that'd be great. I mean, I was just glad we were there. He sat down for, was it 20 minutes at least, and just talked to you.
It was like a conversation.
And he just talked to you. Yeah. And I felt like it was like, as dads, we got to look out for each other. Okay. And we've got to be there for our kids. I want to be there for your kids. You be there for my kids. And I felt like that was one of those moments where, as a dad, he just stepped into the gap for me and just really encouraged you. Of course, then you came out of your shooting slump and then got the D1 scholarship, and the rest is history. For how that went.
Right. The rest is that you can find out the documentary.
Yeah.
And
it's on your Wikipedia page, right?
Yeah, but that was the year that TU went on that run, went to the Elite Eight, almost made it to the Final Four, and I became a huge Bill Self fan. And before that, I gotta be honest, I did not like Kansas. Being from Oklahoma and also living in Missouri for a time, not a Kansas fan at all. Danny Manning.
You lived in Missouri
nothing
too?
About Kansas.
Oh,
but
man.
when he
this is getting worse.
So when he ended up at Kansas, I just felt like, and he's got, every coach gets dogged for who they are, but I just felt like his love for players and the kind of man that he was, at least from what I knew, I was like, I'm a Bill Self fan. So if he's coaching there, I'm a Kansas fan.
I dig it. That's a great story. I've worked with him at least once, a couple times. Actually, I worked with him a couple times, but on the same project. I happened to shoot some stuff for one of the ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries, and it was the one that was following Bill Self, and it wasn't following Bill Self. We had an interview with Bill Self followed the rules of basketball and those being purchased at auction. So it was the whole story leading up to why they're at KU now. And the times I shot with him, I mean, he was a really good dude. He just, and obviously you can't get a full breadth of someone's character over 20, 30 minutes, but you definitely get some insight. And I know there's lots of coaches that would not give you a time of day. There are lots of coaches that are not only just very busy, but also like, cool, got my own thing. And so like you'll figure it out. Right. You'll be great. Pat on the back. But
yeah, the fact that he took time for some, I think you were a sophomore or junior in high school, that wasn't a starter and a star, just a player, just some kid. And that he would do that for a nobody and give that kind of time. I said the ultimate respect for him.
That's great. And I actually love what you mentioned about how, as dads, we have this gap a lot of times. And there's just some things that maybe that's not our arena. Right. And I know for my own sake, for my kids, I can tell them something 20 times, but until they hear someone else say it, then they'll go, okay, yeah. I mean, same thing. Right. I could tell my wife she's beautiful, right? I could say, hey, honey, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, beautiful. But when someone says, hey, you look beautiful today, she's like, they said I look beautiful. And you're like, I do that every day. What do you mean? And it's the same thing with your kids. Hey, you guys are great at this. You can do this. Oh yeah, I don't know, Dad. Yeah. And then someone else says them, right? And so that's really great that you, not only that you were able to have that opportunity, but that you took that step to try to help your son, because that is what we do as dads, right? If we can't do that, if we can't accomplish a thing, or if we can't break through that barrier, then we need to find those outside sources, whether it is, material, whether it's reading or something they're watching or whatever, or whether it's someone that can step in and act as a role model. And that's a really great opportunity. Steven, there's no excuse for you to not beat me at horse now. I mean, you were taught by the man, right? So you should be good, right?
Yeah,
for sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm set up for life, basically.
Okay. Only reason and
I don't remember any words that he actually said. That's what I've been trying to rack my brain, and I don't remember anything specifically he said, but I definitely remember the moment, and I remember him talking to me, and I remember that being enough, right? Like where you were talking about, like where that person was big enough in my own life, as far as like I grew up in Tulsa, he coached for the Tulsa University, like I knew their team, and like he was big enough for when his words said, hey, it's okay, it's just mental, like it doesn't mean that you're a terrible shooter, whatever ends up he said, I was like, okay, and it like clicked, right? And so I think that's where it's really interesting as dads, where it's like we are trying to find different ways to maybe get off this same message, right. Like whether you're, I grew up with my dad was the coach, but then other, players or kids grew up where their dad wasn't necessarily the coach, but maybe is like the assistant coach, or is just a big cheerleader on the sideline, is heavily involved. And I think all those roles are important, and I think, going back to one of the themes that I feel like we've touched on a lot is just being true to yourself. And I think going back to, even pre-pandemic, I had my boys, both of them had played basketball at the local Y. I remember growing up and playing. And I actually like started off not coaching, because I was like, I'm going to just let them be, and I'm going to be a cheerleader, and, I'm going to be there for them. And I remember going through that, and I remember my wife was like, but do you want to coach them? And I was like, well, yeah, but like my schedule, and I'm a freelancer, and Grant, you've talked about this as well, is like, I'm booked, for a whole day, or I don't know what my schedule is going to be like. I don't know if I'm going to be at every practice. And so I just pushed it off. And that actually, like, she was the one that reminded me, like, that's okay if you want to be the coach, or if that's who you want to be, like, that's okay to be that person. And I think that was really interesting for me, because then it allowed me to be like, well, yeah, I am really passionate about this. Like, now if they want to like play a different sport, or if they want to do something different, if they want to do like engineering or something, then I'm probably not the lead on that. But like, with basketball, why wouldn't I be the lead? Like, this is what I'm passionate about. Like, I love setting up the drills and doing all this stuff. And so it was really fun to kind of get back to, then I coached, one of my kids, and I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. Like, I love just the, loudness of a gym when there's like 400 basketballs going off because every kid has a basketball, and there's like this tiny there's this tiny little net that goes in between a half court, you know, that's supposed to like divide the court so that everybody can play, and it's like so chaotic. I'm so happy at that moment. And Sarah was like, I can't even stay here. I can't come with you to practice because it's just too much. You know, she was just so overwhelmed by it. And I was like, no, but there's other coaches and other kids, and there's the bouncing it's the bouncing basketball that I love, the sneaker sound. Like it's just, you know, those are the fun things. And I think it's okay to embrace those things. And it's okay to say like, maybe maybe basketball isn't your thing, and that's totally fine. Maybe March Madness isn't your thing. You know, it just so happens in my family, you know, it was. And that's okay. Maybe, you know, a different sport or something else is important. But one of the things that I also wanted to talk about and touch on was kind of kids sports, right? Because we're also in this moment where we're talking about amateur sports. So these are sports where it's not professional yet, right? But especially here at the college level that we're talking about, even high school, and even sometimes down further, you know, it can feel that way because it feels it's so important, you know, that it can be life and death. But like for you, Dad, that has coached, you know, me and my brothers during this process, and now is even coaching another team, you know, what have you kind of learned there during that process about, you know, how do you not be, I think one of the reasons I didn't want to coach initially is I didn't want to be that crazy dad that's just like thinking that, you know, my 7-year-old team is the Lakers, and if they don't win every season, you know, whatever. I didn't want to be that dad. But like, what are things that you've learned through this process, things that are important?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's understanding, first of all, who you are as a person. And I'm hyper competitive. So when if you understand that about yourself, you're going to get in a 6-year-old game and you're still going to be competitive because it's your nature. It's who you are. But I remember I would always have an assistant coach whenever I was coaching. And in fact, I had one guy one year, he didn't know anything about basketball. And he's like, why do you want me to be the assistant? I said, because I just need you to remind me that there's 7. That's all I need you to do, because I'm going to get all wrapped up in this. I'm going to get really intense. I'm going to feel like it's the Lakers and the NBA championship. And I'm going to forget that I'm coaching 7-year-old rec ball. And he was so great at just going, hey, remember? And I go, oh, that's okay. Yeah, that's right. They're 7 years old. And, you know, I mean, because kids in basketball, the younger they are, it's like, you know, it's like throwing squirrels out onto a court and then trying to get them to be organized. It's just you
herding
don't know
cats.
happening. But it's herding cats. And for me, I think it is so important, one, that you understand who you are. But I'm just so grateful for the game of basketball for me personally, because I love it. And I just happened to have 3 boys that loved it. But I was always very, very conscious of when they stop loving it, I don't want them to feel like they've got to keep playing this game because Dad loves this game.
Right.
I never wanted you or your brothers to feel like, well, Dad loves basketball, and so if I want Dad's love, then I better love basketball. And that is just never, I just been thankful that we could shoot hoop together, we could play together. And so coaching for me, and I just think for dads is just trying to stay rooted in that all I'm trying to do is help my kids. I think it's good to be competitive, by the way. I love being competitive, and I think kids should be competitive, but because you're trying to teach them how life operates and what is it like to lose? What happens when you lose? But I got to be honest. Can I just tell you, like, I'm back coaching again, and I coached 8 and 9-year-olds. I've never had a losing team, but the last 2 years, this year specifically, we didn't win a single game until the very last game. And I thought, I'm going to motivate these kids. So I get them all in a circle at practice, and I'm like, all right, who's tired of losing? I mean, we're just tired of losing. Nobody wants to lose. And they're all looking at me like, what? And I realized they didn't care about winning. No, they did not. But I did have a couple of kids that were competitive. And they wanted to win, you know, and we finally won our last game, and it was the parents who ended up being so excited about it. But I think it's just, for me, it's just about, as a parent, whether you're on the sideline or you're on the bench with your kids, is you got to try to always keep it in perspective of all I'm trying to do is help these kids become better human beings. Like, I think everything as a coach, I mean, you look at, I'm not going to try to get on a rant here, but you look at what's happening in our society and in our world and different things. It's all in how we're training and teaching our children. How do we teach and train them to be competitive, but yet be good sports? How do we teach them to give their best? How do we teach them to play fair and play within the rules? Like, and how do we help them to understand there's rules to life? When there's rules to basketball, then they understand that, and you got to play within these rules. And here's what I told the kids before. I said, listen, you've got 4 other kids out here, and we work together as a team. We're going to be better. And does that not play out in what you guys do for a living? Like, if you play as a team, you work as a team, you're going to be much better. So I feel like I'm not to overstate it, but I feel like when I'm coaching, and I think this is why I love coaching, is I am preparing these kids for life. I feel like I am preparing them for what's next, how they're going to be in the classroom, how they're going to be at home with their siblings, how they're going to act on the playground, what they're going to be like when they get in high school. I mean, I take it very, very seriously, because I want to put something in them that is going to help them to be a better human. And hopefully the kids that I've coached, that's been true.
Okay. Now that's a great stance. Have either of you seen the show Ted Lasso yet?
Yes.
You've seen it. Okay. You've both seen it. Okay. Okay, I'm only through episode 4. I literally just started it last night, and
it's amazing.
There's so many references to Kansas, which I love. I love Jason Sudeikis. Yes. By the way, Jason Sudeikis went to the same high school I did. He was a big Jayhawk fan. I mean, like, there's all that stuff that for me, there's a deeper connection, right? But for anyone who's not connected exactly like I am to the project for that reason, again, I'm only 4 episodes in, so I don't know yet. But this is a guy who's a father figure who is coaching, and his goal is to make these men better men. And, you know, a lot of these great coaches that you hear about, they're not saying it's all about the wins. I want the wins. I want the wins. It's about, I want to make the best person that I can make and send them out into a society where they can then make people better. And I think that's such a wonderful way of saying that. It's a wonderful way of, you know, looking at life. I don't know about you, Stephen, or even you, Brad, when in your days of probably playing sports, but for me, I've had experiences where I've had very toxic role models or toxic coaches that, you know, I had at times where I'm playing sports and the coach was not there because of some kind of personal problem, and another parent had to just step in. And so a lot of times we would have practices or have games where we're like, we just didn't know if anyone was going to be there when we showed up. And I've also had the coaches that say like, hey, you suck. And you're like, that doesn't feel motivating. Like, I know that may be motivating to some people, but to me, especially when you're comparing coaching to parenting, like, I couldn't imagine coaching in a different perspective. I could imagine that kind of coaching and then translating that to parenting, where you're going like, oh, my kid's having a really hard time writing a paper. You know, it's because you suck. Like, how are they going to go, you know what? You're right, Dad. Let me do better because of your job is to build them up. Right. And for me, when I remember basketball specifically, I played basketball for about 3 years. I didn't end up doing it in high school because I went on to football, and that was my passion. But basketball, I had so much fun doing basketball. When I started like 6th grade, we had kind of a rocky year, rocky team. We had these tiers, which were, you had A, you had Super A or Super B, and then B, right? Because they didn't want to call C, but it was essentially C League. And so you had A, Super B, and B. And I remember, you know, I think I didn't get to try out or anything for 6th grade. I was just plugged in. So they're like, cool, you're on B level. And I played on a team and we hardly won and we just had a hard time. And then the next year, my dad, who had coached my soccer team when I was little and my t-ball teams and things like that was always part of my, you know, little kid experience. And he was like, hey, I think I'm going to coach basketball next year. Like, I'll be the coach for you. I was like, great. And because there weren't any openings in A or Super B, he was relegated or whatever to coach the B team. And we had tryouts and I couldn't try out the same time. So I remember me and this other kid who, you know, in 7th grade is 6'4" already. We ranked like 1 and 2 in our district or in our, you know, in our area. So I was actually an A player, which was really, very confidence boosting for me at the time. But because my dad could only coach B, I was an A player that got to play on a B squad. And then basically he more or less just picked all of my friends and people that I knew, and then some other kids I didn't really know, but became my friends because now we had this really fun team that was together where my dad was coaching. And honestly, my dad is great at basketball, loves basketball, played basketball, but I don't know that he knows everything inside and out. He doesn't know all the plays. Like we had fun names for plays that were like totally ridiculous. We did the flying V that the Mighty Ducks do in the movies. Like that was one of our plays. That's highly illegal. Like you cannot do those things. But that's the kind of stuff we were doing because we were just having so much fun playing. And yes, we won a lot of games. And I remember just destroying some teams. It was awesome. But that wasn't the thing that I remember most. What I remember most was having fun on the sidelines, was doing practice, was like, I don't know if you guys remember when the Cabbage Patch dolls were out and they were literally eating people's hair. Like they got recalled because they were eating children's hair that would get too close to the mouth that would be moving because they go, and anyway, whatever. That was the time period that I was playing basketball. My dad was a coach. So we had a saying on the sideline, which we started chanting, "Eat their hair." And that was our team. We just did ridiculous stuff, but it was so much fun. And even though we weren't winning all the championships and all that stuff, I remember that so fondly because my dad was the coach. He was so involved, and he wasn't saying you suck. He wasn't saying, hey, you need to get, I mean, he wasn't making me the star of the team, but he also wasn't making me he wasn't riding me the hardest. It was an all-inclusive, I'm going to build you up kind of thing. And that, I haven't got the chance to coach my kids yet. And I'm super afraid that I'm going to be the dad that's extra hard on my son or my daughter because I know you're capable of more, right? And I think that's the thing that I battle with so much. So what in you, Brad, is what made you, and I guess Steven, since you've coached now, I mean, what in you guys is the part that helps you be able to balance that and say, like, even though you're my child and you're on my squad here, how do I treat you like everybody else? Or, so you're not doing favoritism, but you're also not riding them so hard that they're just like, Dad, I don't want to play for you anymore. This is horrible. Like what's that like?
Yeah.
How do you do that? Tell me.
Grant, I just think you just got to be honest with yourself and know that I think you said it right, that when you want the best for your kids, you're always harder on the people that you love the most, because you just look at your child, and I never had NBA aspirations or even college aspirations for any of my kids. I just wanted them to do well. And if they weren't playing up to their abilities, or they were being lazy or whatever it is they were doing, I could tend to be a little harder on them. And I think for me, I don't think I've ever told this story, and I don't think Steven would even remember this, but we were playing the YMCA, and I was a brand new coach. I was a young dad, and Steven was like 5-6 years old. And I never forget leaving the gym, and he's like 6. But I know this may sound crazy, but at 6 years old, Steven was a really, really good basketball player. Like, he could dribble with both hands. He could shoot from almost anywhere on the floor. So we could win any game because I had him dribbling since the time he was like 2 years old. And so when he was 6, he was really, really good. And I remember we were driving home one day from one of the games, and I don't remember much about it, except that I was like, kind of not riding him, but kind of upset, like, you could do this, you need to do that. And then I looked at him I looked in the rearview mirror, and I saw his face, and I saw how disappointed he was. And it just stopped me as a dad and went, man, what the heck am I doing? Like, this is like, he's like 6. Come on, dude, ease up. And I think just as a dad, it's not basketball. If it's not basketball, it's grades. If it wasn't grades, it was, homework, or it was cleaning your room. It was mowing the yard or whatever with all the kids. And I just wanted them to do the very best because I wanted the best for them. And I wanted them, I had visions of them being an adult one day and being successful. I mean, and I see what you're doing, what you're having to do right now, Steven, in the job that you're in and what it requires out of you. And so I just think for some of it is being honest with yourself. As Steven will probably remember this, I know the other boys do, is I think one of the best things a dad can do is when you screw up is go to your kid and own it, and just look him in the eyes, and don't say, I'm sorry, but say, will you forgive me? And own up to what you did. In other words, like, hey, I was way too hard on you. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have acted. I blew up. I shouldn't have been this way. And man, will you forgive me? I've got to do better. And I think that's a lot of dads are afraid to kind of show that side. And I've never been afraid to show that side. Problem is, I had to say it way more often than I wanted to say.
I was going to say, I think you and I have a little bit more in common than just being Lakers fans at this point, because I feel like I do that almost on a daily basis. Like I mean, we talk a lot about on this podcast about how as dads, we tend to fail every day, but failing up is the goal, right? So, I'm constantly telling my kids that I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry that I shouldn't have phrased that way. I shouldn't have talked to you. Shouldn't have expected that out of you. And that hopefully you're right on. And there's some gold in there, because if I'm doing that and you're saying that I should be doing it, then yes, I'm doing something right. These kids are going to turn out at least like Steven, which is, it's okay. It's okay.
It's all right.
Steven.
It's all right.
Yeah. I just, and not to be, not to be too serious about it, but I think you also have to be honest as a father. And I think it's really important for a dad to say, if you've gone over into the lane of abuse, verbal abuse, even like physical abuse, you got to get help. I mean, you just can't go to your kid and just say, hey, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? You got to get some help. But I think what you're talking about, Grant, and what we're talking about in this realm is more of just like, as a dad, I yelled or I got mad, I got upset, and I said something I shouldn't have said. And I love what you guys are doing on this podcast of just being vulnerable, being real, because as dads, you sit around and many times you just can. And I thought the more kids I had, the more chance I had of being successful as a father. And what I discovered was the opposite of that. More opportunities I had to screw up.
I concur. Yeah.
Like, oh, wow, I'm just screwing up more, And so I often think, we're empty nesters now. I'm like, maybe I should get one more. And if I got one more, I could do it perfect.
Yeah.
But that's just not true.
Well, I think one of the things as a kid that I feel like I didn't understand until being a dad was the expectations on different kids, why are their parents so super excited and he's not even playing in the game, or whatever that might entail, right? Like whether it's sports or grades or some parents have different rules and different that, and you'd always constantly be comparing yourself to that. And I think not until I was a dad that I realized, like with my three, they're very different, and they're not just in personality, but in their strengths and what they can do. And that's where I think what you said earlier is so impactful as far as even being in sports, but more in life, is like really being aware and communication, like being aware of who your kids are, what they're capable of, and then really helping them measure up with that. The thing I like about sports is it's a really easy way to measure. With some of the other things in life, it's kind of hard, yes, grades and stuff, but how do you measure like integrity and some of these other things are a little bit not so predefined or have a very like dark black line that when you jump over it, you get a foul or get some kind of penalty or some kind of thing. But even with my own kids, in sports, with Wesley, with our youngest, like him just playing sports and just dribbling, I was so excited. Like he would get the ball and he would dribble from the free throw line of the other side of the court to half court. And then he would shoot it from half court and he would make it about 1.5 foot, but I'm like, just the fact that he's like dribbling and he's a part of a team and like whatever, like that's what I'm so excited about.
Right.
With Carter, it's a little bit different. I had a little bit different expectations because he was able to dribble a little bit better and be involved. So like I had different, higher expectations for him, or I would talk to him a little bit more. But I remember there being like, even in our 6 and under, there was a dad that would stand underneath the basketball goal and shout at his kid, spot up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you like, I don't even think that kid knows what to do when you're saying that to him. You're talking to him as if he's like a high schooler. And as if like he even, because I'm like looking at his child and I'm like, he's not the spot up kid. I don't know what to tell you, but he's not that kid. Like, you know what I mean?
But by the way, Steven, I got to throw that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But well, I was just saying, like, I think that's important. Whether you're the coach, you're the parent, you know, whatever it is, being real with your kid. And I think it's important. Like, even my kids play basketball out in the backyard, you know, and Peyton's 10, you know, and she still shoots it, you know, from the chest like this, you know, still shoots it from this way. And just yesterday I was like, hey, honey, how about you do it this way? She's like, oh yeah, dad. And she shot it that way. And I was like, okay, we're making the transition. Here we go. We're going to make it like where she knows how to shoot a basketball. And that's all my expectation. And I think this comes from you, Dad, where it's like with sports in particular, I just want them to understand sports so that I can talk to them about it. Now, whether they pick to play soccer, t-ball, or they go to some Lego club or Pokemon thing, I don't really care, but I care that at least this is my passion and I want you to be involved in it just as much as I want to be involved in your passions.
Yeah. And so I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry about that, but I was jumping in. I wanted to jump in because what you talked about was the, you know, not the spot up kid, right? And that made me think of exactly what you're talking about now is maybe you know, especially when you have multiple children, Brad, we're talking about this, right? You may have a child that's not into sports like you are. Like I'm a dad who loves sports. I love it through and through, but I don't want my kids to feel like they have to love sports, especially not to earn my love, right? I think it's very well said. But you got to remember too, that if your child is not into that, you have to be that fan, that sports fan at what they're doing. Right. A Lego building competition or a, you know, in theater or whatever it may be. For example, my son, we haven't got into many sports yet, and he just may not get into sports. It may be that he's, you know, just not aware of it, or it may just be that he's just choosing not to do it. But at the moment, he's done theater because his school does theater and he really loves it. He really has a really good time being a, you know, little actor up on stage. And even though, yes, I do film, I don't necessarily come from theater. So it's not something I'm super comfortable with. And I will step in as a dad and be his biggest fan and support him. And I end up being very involved in the theater and in these plays at the school because, you know, now I've turned in from like, I could be a dad that's just going like, hey man, you got this, to now I'm a dad that's going and I'm doing lighting for the show because I want to be so involved that he knows that maybe I'm not the coach, but I'm there and I'm your cheerleader. Right. Because whatever it may be, us as dads, we need to find that connection to our kids and let them know that we are their biggest fan, whatever it may be. So I think, you know, that's,
What's interesting, Grant, what's interesting is that, you know, just because you're a parent doesn't mean that you're not a selfish person or an unselfish person. But you have a decision to make when you're parenting, and that is it teaches you and you have an opportunity to learn what it is to give. And to kill the selfish nature in you. Like we all got this idea about, man, it's about, man, I want to do, like for me, I'm like, it's basketball. I want to do my basketball thing. But we also have our youngest is a daughter. And I remember when she was a year old and I thought, this is it. I'm gonna teach her dribble. And this is it. She's going to be playing. She's going to be the next, this is going to be amazing. And she could not catch a basketball for nothing. She had no coordination to play the game whatsoever. In fact, Laura, my wife Laura wanted her to play soccer and thought that'd be fun. And I said, I'm not doing that to a coach. I am not going to do that to a coach. But her love was other things like you talked about, like theater and she loved and she actually got into band. I remember she joined the band in high school and she was in color guard. And I used to go to the bathroom at halftime. I mean, the band came out. That was my cue to go to the snack bar. But I just became the biggest cheerleader for band. And so what you're saying is so important as a dad, and it's hard, but you've got to be the biggest cheerleader for whatever your kid loves. And you may go, man, I just am not into that. Who cares?
Right.
Figure out, I mean, just go sit down, be a part of it, cheer it. If it's art, if it's theater, whatever it is, and it may not be your thing, but this is the thing I always tried to remember. And I wasn't great at it all the time, but just I tried to remember is they are my thing. That kid is my thing. And so whatever they're into, I'm into. So Steven played basketball all the way through high school, but then his brother Shane, he quit when he got into like junior high. And then his son, my son Jeremiah, 6'3". I thought, this is it. I've got the kid. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to be sitting at games in high school. And he got into his junior year and he's like, Dad, it's just not my thing anymore. I was like, that's okay. But I said, what is your thing?
Right.
Let's find what your thing is. And so that's so big, Grant, is you have to admit to yourself, I don't even know if I should say this on a podcast, but I'm like, you have to admit, like, I don't like that.
Right.
I'm not really into that. Right. Kind of bores me.
But I've learned more about Pokemon than I ever thought I would know about Pokemon. I don't.
You've got to work through it.
Yes.
I'm with you, man.
And it will in turn. So here's the thing that I want to say on that too, as I said earlier, I want so badly for my kids to be better humans, but truthfully, they are teaching us how to be better humans. I mean, because if they can kill that selfishness in me and I can learn to love them for the things they love that I may not, when I go out into the world, I'm going to be kinder. I'm going to be more appreciative. I'm going to have a better attitude towards people around me. I mean, just so much is wrapped up in it. And
I will tell you, just I'm 100% with you on that, because I've already had that experience as a dad where I'm out there and you see someone and they may do something stupid or cut you off or whatever. And there is that part of me that normally I would just go like, idiot. Like, whatever. I don't, they're not even human to me, right? They're just somebody. And now I look at like everybody now as that was somebody's baby once. And I know not everybody has the same story, but just that moment, that thing of like being a dad and experiencing that and having that little bit of selfishness, not all of it's gone. Okay. Not all of it is gone for sure. But, having some of that, like you said, have some of that die off, it really does give you that perspective. And it doesn't just help you with your kids. It helps you with like in the community and just driving to work, knowing that like, okay, we're all from a family. We're all from something. We're all someone's like most important person. And that.
Hey, Grant, what?
Oh, no, that's it. I was just saying, it's really just helped give so much perspective on it.
Yeah, I just, one of the things I did this year, I've never, ever done this, is because I'm a Raider fan and I'm a Kentucky fan and both teams have been terrible.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
And with COVID and all that, just, you're not sorry. I know you're not sorry. but because I'm such a rabid fan, I can get really upset, and I can really get upset at a player and be like, what is wrong with you? And I started this year for the first time. I actually started watching press conferences and watching the press conferences with the players. Yeah. I've never done that before, but I started watching them religiously because what it did for me, and it completely changed sports for me, was I started seeing them as human. And I realized, this kid's 19 years old. Yeah. Why would I? He's just a kid. He's trying to figure out, he doesn't even know, he's shown up at this school. He doesn't know, it's middle of COVID. He's not with his players and his coaches. Everything's upside down. He's trying to figure out how to play basketball. He's got all this pressure on him that he's supposed to be a one and doneer, and he's barely holding on. And I realized when I started watching the press conferences, I started seeing these men and these boys as human, and it radically changed how I root for sports. And I found myself watching every Kentucky game this year that they were losing, but rooting for the players. Right. Like, man, I just wanted them to do well.
No, I'm with you. And I will say fandom is one of those, fan stands for fanatic. So it is a very strange balance that we have, us being dads, we're fans of sports, but then we're fans of our kids. It's this love and passion and this weird expectation that we put on something that we give so much weight to. I will say, that being said, if you are a fan of this podcast, It's a Dad Thing podcast, make sure, and I got to step in and put the plug in here, right? That was a pretty good transition, right? I mean, I've junked it up now, but I'm trying. Okay, if you're a fan of It's a Dad Thing podcast, then I want you to make sure that you subscribe, you like, you rate, review, wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, whether it's on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever it is. Please give us a like, a rate, give us a little comment. Hey, you guys are doing great. You can quote me on that. That's fine. Anything to help our show grow, because what we're here for is we are fans of dads, and we are fans of dads that are trying to be better dads. So if we can help you be a better dad by us trying to work our stuff out and trying to figure it out too, we want to be there for you. We want to know if there's any topics you want to cover, if there's any sports teams you want to talk about. I'll talk about other sports teams. It's fine. I don't like it, but I'll do it. But yes, that's what we're here for. So Brad, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I do want to do one thing before we get out of here. I know the brackets just came out. I don't want to break down the whole field of 64 or 68, I guess. I want to, but I kind of feel like I have to sleep on it. So here's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah,
let's do this. Let's take a look at the brackets. And while you guys are taking a look at your brackets, I want to hear what you think are your final four. Okay, we don't even have to do a winner, but I want to hear your final four. Oh. So just give the bracket a glance real quick. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to tell everybody out there, we are actually starting our own bracket this year. If any of you have the NCAA March Madness Bracket Challenge, if you're familiar with that, that would be the official NCAA bracket. We started a group. We have a group. So if you want to challenge us, if you want to go against Steven and I and Brad, and anybody else who wants to join us, probably the 4 or 5 listeners that we have out there, let's do it. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's pick our teams. Here's what we do. You're going to find under March Madness Bracket Challenge, you're going to search for the group A Dad Thing Bracket. Okay. They limited my characters. I couldn't say It's a Dad Thing Bracket. So don't try to type that in, but it's A Dad Thing Bracket. Okay. Right now it's private just for us because we just built it, but we're going to make it public. So by the time this is planned, it's going to be public. It'll be free to open. I will try to put a link to it in the description. So if you're listening to this on Apple Podcast or Google Play or wherever you listen to it, scroll down. There should be a link to it. If not, you can connect to us there, or if you want to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere that It's a Dad Thing podcast is at on all the socials, we're there, and I'll have those links there for you. Okay, so go ahead and get on there. Join March Madness Bracket Challenge. The group again name is called A Dad Thing Bracket, and let's see how well you do against us. Right, we'll have a dad bracket. Okay, so that being said, that gave you guys enough time to look it over.
Yeah, I want to ask my dad a couple of questions. What do you, when you first look at a bracket, because I know what I'm looking for, what are kind of a couple things that you're looking for? Because now they've come out with some stats as far as like, what are the seeds that you typically get in? And we're talking Final Four, not for first round upsets, because that's a whole nother game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The two big things I always look at are injuries. So who has injuries right now? Yeah, because a lot of people don't look at that, and you get one player down, and in college basketball they're going to be completely out of sorts, and their chances of getting the Final Four are really not good. The other thing is winning streak. Have they been winning? Were they winning in February and especially into March? So unfortunately, like the University of Oklahoma. Man,
I know. I was really bummed. They were doing so well until the last few weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, at least.
Yeah. But Oklahoma State looks good. Yeah, but they're going to be an early exit.
Oh, you'll probably make it. Yeah.
They're not playing.
Yeah, they'll be out pretty soon.
So those are the two things. But I will tell you this, Stephen, your brother Jeremiah said, Dad, this could be your best year picking the bracket because nobody knows what's going on. Because
I know.
Because I get so frustrated because nobody watches the game like I do, at least in our family and people around me. And I know so much about it and so much about these players and the games and all of this, and I never win. I always end up like 5th or 6th. Yeah. And I'm like, how is this happening? Yeah. But that's the beauty of the tournament. Right. That's what I love about this tournament too.
And these are one game. This is different than NBA finals. This is more football oriented where it's like, hey, but even in basketball, if you just have one game where you're hot from 3 or whatever, like you can win it versus like where football even is just a lot harder because of the offensive defensive lines and those kind of other things that go into it. But basketball is so special because you can have one player. And so for me, like in my final 4 picks, so here's my just off the cuff final 4 picks. I feel like out of the West is Gonzaga. I feel like out of this, and this is out of the South is Baylor. And I know they're both ones. And I'm going to even go out of the East with Michigan. So 3 number ones, which probably won't happen. But out of this Midwest, I'm going to say Oklahoma State. And that's because Oklahoma State has Wade Cunningham. And the very little bit that I've watched of college basketball this year, that dude can get a shot from anywhere and has such poise that I'm like, for an NCAA tournament, that is unbelievable to have a player like that.
Yeah, they had, if he hadn't gotten in foul trouble in that first half against Texas, they would have won the Big 12 championship.
Oh, okay.
But he got in foul trouble and he wasn't available, and so they couldn't come back. But he single-handedly, brought them back.
I watched this. Oh, I only saw the second half.
Like a minute to go.
Yeah, I only saw the second half.
Okay. But yeah, a minute to go, it was over. And he just like, it's okay. I'll just hit 3 threes. That's what I'll do.
It's just insane.
He's insane.
All right, what about you, Dad, or Grant? Which one?
Yeah, go for it.
Let me go. So, let's see here. So this is my first stab at it, but I guess I could change this. I don't know that I'm going to be much different than you. Out of the West, I got Gonzaga winning it all. I don't see how anybody's going to beat them. They're so good. So good. Out of the South, Baylor, same thing. I think they're number 1, but watch them, and they are. Now, here's the other thing that's good too, is like in order to win. So another thing I would tell you too is you got to have upperclassmen. So if they're too young, like Wade Cunningham, he's a young guy, so it's a little iffy to me. But when you get upperclassmen on your squad, you're going to do great. So I've got Baylor there, and then. Man, this is tough. I think the Midwest bracket is wide open, but I think I'm going to go Oklahoma State as well on that. It could be Illinois, but I think it's probably Oklahoma State could get hot. And then out of the East, I'm going to go not Michigan because they've got a key injury. And I'm going to go with Alabama because I think that Alabama is one of the hottest teams in the league right now. Alabama and in the NCAA, they're just playing lights out. And nobody's going to pick Alabama because they're a football school,
right?
But they are looking so good.
No, that's good. Well, I will tell you for my final 2, I'm going to go Duke versus Kentucky. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
He was hold on to that one.
I think I mixed that up a little bit. Let me just that was last year's bracket.
2021.
Yeah.
We're in 2021.
Wrong year. My bad. Oh, here it is. Oh, they're not on this one. Okay. I'll figure it out. Okay, so here's my bracket. One, I will tell you, I'm going to start down in the East bracket because what you just said, which is no one's going to pick Alabama. I'm on it. I'm on that Alabama train. I think it's, I mean, they're number 2. So, I mean, I think it feels really weird saying Alabama going to the Final Four because I feel like it's football season when we're doing that. But yes, I'm going to go Alabama. I think the only other really real good contender in that, I think Colorado can have a little bit of a run because of what their bracket is. I think Colorado can make it Elite 8. I don't know if they'll go Final Four, but I think Colorado's a decent team. You're right. Michigan's got an injury. I think they're going to be weirdly out of it. And I think Texas has got a chance, but I'm going to go with Alabama. I think they're a strong team. They're a hot team. I'm going to go West. This is going to be really hard for me because my Jayhawks are there, but I will tell you only because they got pulled out of the Big 12 tournament because of COVID. I think it's Kansas, and is Virginia the other team? No. Who's the other team? There was another team. It was Duke.
I don't know.
Duke didn't make it. Doesn't matter.
Right.
Duke. I was like, there's 2 teams that just had COVID hit real hard.
Yeah, no, Virginia too.
Okay, Virginia so COVID, I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah.
Virginia is usually really, always so strong defensively every year, and I think that matters so much in the tournament. But For the West, yes, I'm going to go Gonzaga, and it breaks my heart, but I'm just not even sure if Kansas is really going to be able to be there. And if they are there, I'm just not sure where they're going to be, if they have the whole team quarantine and they can't do anything together.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so difficult going into this. They were starting to build some momentum back getting into that tournament. They had a really great game, and then they were going to face Texas, and there was possibility, but it's been a weird year. And I think, the Blue Buds being all down, I don't think Kansas is an exception. So I'm glad we made it. I'm glad we still have our streak alive, but I just think Gonzaga is grown men. They are just between Gonzaga, right? Gonzaga is my team out of the West, and my team out of the South is Baylor. And I think those two teams, yes, they are the favorites. They're the favorite odds, but they are grown men playing amongst boys. And it makes me think of 2012, and you might get some joy out of this, but Kentucky played Kansas in the finals, right? Kentucky that year, all of those players went in the draft.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely remember that. That was the year of AD.
What happened to that game? I don't remember what happened to that game.
Well, we were there. We got there. We arrived. But then it was Kentucky's game. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's the year of Anthony Davis, right? I mean, he just was amazing. Yeah. And not to mention the whole starting five, and I think it was and their 6-man, like they all got drafted in the first round. Like it was insane. So that was literally like NBA light playing against the college athletes. And so I mean, as a fan, I remember being like, cool, we're here, but we're not going to win this game. It's awesome that we're being somewhat competitive, but that's it. And I think that is this year's Baylor and Gonzaga. They've just been amazing. The other one too is really hard for me because I really like Ohio State, and I love their showing in the Big Ten championship, winning that overtime game.
Yeah.
But I think, it's Baylor. They've been a strong team. They did lose to the Jayhawks once, but I mean, I'm just who's counting. And then the trickiest bracket for me is the Midwest. I love what you guys are saying about Oklahoma State. I think Illinois has really got a shot. I think they're really a great team, but I'm going to go a little wild card here. And it's not that wild card. It's a number 3 seed. It's West Virginia. I think it's Bob Huggins' time. I think a little Huggy action is gonna make it to the finals. And if you look at their road, I just think they've got a road that is manageable. And I think whether they're facing
that's the other key too.
Whether they're facing the
road. What's the road?
So I mean that's my team. Those are my 4 teams. Hey, listeners out there or watchers out there, depending on what you're watching or listening to on this, let us know what you think. Again, the bracket, look, if you hate our picks, that's fine. I may not like your picks either. Okay. That's okay. That's what we do. This is March. All right. So again, get on March Madness. What's the name of the app? March Madness Bracket Challenge. And then you're going to search for the name, Dad Thing Bracket. It's all one word because spaces are too valuable. Like I just can't put spaces in there. All right. Again, I'll put links down below. I'll put links on our socials, and that's it, guys. Anything you want to add? No, we got to talk sports. Got to talk dad.
That's it. Hey, I just want to tell let me just tell you that. I just love what you guys are doing. I love this podcast and how you guys are just raw and real. And man, where was something like this when I was doing the dad thing?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I will tell you, you have a very high honor on this show. Not only have you fathered one of our hosts, but you're the first official grandfather on It's a Dad Thing podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. So hey, very, very high honor. But Brad, thank you for coming on. Thank you for putting up with Steven your whole life, for his whole life. But also, thanks for putting up with me for an hour. I mean, I appreciate it. So I thank you for coming on. Steven, anything you want to add?
No, I appreciate you, Dad, coming on. I know this is such a big time in our family life, but super excited to finally get this tournament off the ground. I was so sad last year, but also just stoked to have you on. It's a Dad Thing podcast, having a dad on. It's awesome. And so we're going to continue building this community, and we want other dads to be involved. And like Grant said, if you guys have any questions, anything that you want to add to this or things that you want us to cover, let us know, because it's about the community. It's about other dads, and it's about learning together. So we're super excited that you guys are here, and we're so happy that you're listening or watching or however you're consuming.
All right. You hear it here first. It's a dad thing podcast. It's a grandpa thing podcast too. All right, everybody, have a great week. Enjoy the tournament. Enjoy March. Brad, again, thank you for coming on. Everybody out there, stay safe. And if you're a dad, you know other dads that could use some help or that are struggling or whatever it could be, reach out to them, tell them about our podcast, and like, subscribe, all the fun stuff. All right, we will talk to you all later. Next, terrible. So bad at endings. Oh, hey, this is a good opportunity to fail, right? To fail up. We talked about this. Oh, I just failed up. Excellent. All right. I'll apologize to my kids for that ending. Dads, we'll see you next time. We'll listen to you next time. All right. Talk to you later, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening.